Disclaimer. An Assortment of Cautionaries is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual places is purely coincidental. The stories presented in this podcast are original works created for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised as some content may be unsettling, disturbing, and triggering. Hello, how are you? I'm Grim Maiden, the keeper of stories. Welcome to the town's library. Good thing I've only just finished my rounds. Someone's got to keep an eye on those towering shelves. Can I help you with something? Oh, what's that on the floor? Looks like a rogue page gone missing from a book. Lousy bindings, I'm telling you. Thank my keen eyes caught it before the scribe spotted it. Now, do me a favour, would you, and pick it up for me, please. Careful, these pages are irreplaceable. A page bearing no title. I see. The edges look all right, bits of stained spots here and there. However, there's a small sighting at the bottom, do you see it? Confession number 44. I see. Must be from one of the confessions repository. From what little I could read, this one should be worth it. Join me if you've got time to spare, and I'll read to you a confession, scribed by an 8-year-old Alexander who started school and never wanted to go back again. I looked at the Midnight Grove school uniform that Mummy and Papa laid out for me, so carefully pressed and laid out for me on my bed, and the shoes placed right underneath. I took one last glance at it, more excited than I'd like to admit, and imagined how smart I'm going to look before going in to take a bath. Bath time was quicker than normal, and I got dressed up before Mummy could come and help me, despite her telling me precisely to wait for her. Mummy walked in right when I was about to finish buttoning my shirt. She looked crossed as she unbuttoned the mismatched ones to fix them for me, but her smile did not fade, which made her face glow in the evening sunset as she tucked the shirt in. When she was finished, she looked me square in the eyes and warned, "You'll be in trouble if you don't listen to instructions, Alexander." Her smile softened the warning, but she used her serious voice, which got me worried. I have always obeyed Mummy, but something about the way she reprimanded me made me feel guilty. "Yes, Mummy," I promised her. She smiled, but her eyes remained indifferent. In a desperate attempt to regain her warmth, I insisted I'll be a good boy and behave well in school. That got her smiling wider as she nodded, finally satisfied with her point being delivered. "Now, Alexander, I trust you with your shoes while I go get ready for work." Mummy and Papa are two of the most hard-working people I've ever known, but then again, they're the only people I've really ever known. I don't know what they do to put food on our table and to have been able to send me to school, the only school in our town, the prestigious academic institution of Midnight Grove School, a night school, that is. Papa said not everyone gets to go to school, and those that do should count themselves very lucky to have a kickstart in life. That people who has gone to school always do better in society than those who are left out. So I slipped into my shoes and got ready to show off my uniform. Bounding down the stairs, I found Papa in the kitchen, his evening tea in hand. He looked at me proudly. The evening tea was a whirlwind of chatter and laughter as I fueled up for the night ahead. The table was set with my favourite meat sandwich, not too fatty like pork, not too mushy like chicken. It was the right texture and taste. I gobbled up so fast. Then Papa walked me to the Midnight Grove, his hand on my shoulder. But when we arrived, he paused and knelt down to my level, a serious expression on his face. "Your shoes, Alexander! Your laces are not tied properly. At Midnight Grove there will be no room for mistakes, I'm telling you. And certainly no warnings given. Punishment right away. You must be perfect, boy." Papa was not angry. That much I was sure of. But it twisted my stomach to see fear in his eyes. I merely nodded. Papa's words were a stark reminder of the high expectations placed upon me. With his words lingering in the air, I entered the grounds of the school with the other boys dressed identical to me and the girls in their pinafores. They walked upright in measured steps. A boy next to me and Papa stood by his mummy, tugging onto her dress. She looked stern, and her face so angular, wearing a hard expression. The boy, on the contrary, was red and swollen in his face, and his eyes were pooling with tears, risking his mummy's anger. The boy's mummy peeled him away from her and pushed him on his way. "Go, Michael." There was no warmth in her voice. If I were Michael, I'd better off walk into the classroom than go back. With a quick wave to my worried Papa, I walked to Michael and introduced myself. Best to make friends, I thought. We then entered the school building, not wanting to be late on the first night. As I entered the classroom, a sense of quiet filled the air. The room was plain, with rows of desks neatly aligned, and a single fluorescent light flickered intermittently overhead. The students sat in silence, their eyes fixed straight ahead, not daring to meet each other's gaze. They were like statues, frozen in place, not one hand resting on the desk. At the front of the class, the teacher stood with her hands clasped back and a smile on her face. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Miss Thompson, and I'll be your teacher." She took time to look at everyone as she greeted her students. Then she spoke of obedience and discipline, of the importance of following rules and never questioning authority. The other students listened intently, their eyes fixed on the teacher as if hanging on to her every word for their dear life. Some looked like they knew too much about Midnight Grove for their own good. The teacher's smile never faltered as she went through the attendance list, her eyes scanning the room with a watchful gaze, and when she finished, she looked around the classroom with a satisfied nod, still smiling. "Let's start tonight's lesson with a question, shall we? Say, what is the capital of the Windlethorn Peninsula? Anyone?" She looked around the room with eyes wide and expectantly, and after a moment, her gaze settled to a corner on a student, which happened to be poor Michael. The boy looked shocked and hesitated for a moment. His voice trembled as he attempted. The capital is," he started, his voice faltering as he struggled to find the right answer. "Go on, I won't bite you," Miss Thompson teased. The rest of the classroom at once looked back at the teacher and made a point not to look in Michael's way at any cost. "The capital is Elderford," he said. I couldn't help but shake my head. I almost wanted to help him. The teacher's smile remained fixed. Her eyes locked on him. She began stalking to his seat in slow strides, and suddenly something clicked for Michael. "Duskhaven District!" he cried. A silent relief washed over the room as the tension lifted. The teacher's smile faded into a slow smirk, and she nodded. "Indeed, Duskhaven District is the capital of our country, students. And what about our neighbouring country? Can anyone tell me its capital?" "Claudia," she addressed a girl. The teacher then turned to a girl in the front row, her smirk going back to that smile, that uncanny smile. The girl hesitated, her eyes darting around nervously around the room. I took a risk to help her by mouthing the answer. I know I shouldn't have done that, but I quickly saved myself and her as soon as the teacher turned to look at me when she saw Claudia looking desperately in my direction. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. I don't know." To which the teacher's disappointment turned to something else, rather a gleam of excitement. "That's quite all right, Claudia. Please go and see the headmistress. I'm sure she'll be delighted to see you." As the girl quietly walked out of the classroom, the door closed after her with a soft click, and then the lesson began. Soon another bell tolled, reverberating through all of Midnight Grove. Miss Thompson turned around from her chalkboard. "Children, you may take your recess break. 15 minutes and you'll be back here." The students rose in unison, their movements precise and synchronized as they walked out of the classroom in a straight line. I followed the others out into the hallway and caught up with Michael. "Do you know where Claudia went?" Michael glanced around, his eyes wary, before leaning in closer to me. "She got sent to the headmistress's office. It's for punishment." "Punishment?" I echoed, my curiosity piqued. "But what did she do?" Michael's expression turned solemn and he glanced around again before speaking. "They don't like it when you don't know the answers," he said. "They do bite if you make mistakes." Childish, but his words sent a chill down my spine and I shivered despite the warmth of the hallway. I decided to head to the canteen for some snacks. As I walked through the hallway, my stomach rumbled at the smell of delicious meat, the same one that Mummy prepares for me. A good distraction, I thought. As I held the sausages in my hand, I noticed a signboard pointing to the headmistress's office. I needed to know. I decided to investigate and turned down the corridor indicated by the sign. The hallway was quiet. The fluorescent lights cast a dim glow, creating long shadows that stretched across the floor. I felt a sense of unease as I walked further, passing by empty classrooms. As I rounded a corner, I heard grown-ups laughing. Intrigued, I quickened my pace and soon found myself standing in front of the teacher's room. Peeking through a small window, I tried to catch a glimpse of what was inside, or rather who was inside. The room was dimly lit, but I could make out a group of teachers sitting around a table, their voices hushed but filled with an air of excitement. The scent of something delicious wafted through the crack in the door. A familiar aroma. Yes, the same meat sausages that I held in my hand. I needed to find the headmistress's office to check on Claudia before recess time is over, and found it, secluded in a corner of the building. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, peering inside. The room was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn over the windows, nothing but an orb of light lighting the entire room. Behind a large desk, the headmistress, she was not quite seated, but rather looked like working on something else on a work table behind her desk. She was dressed immaculately, in a sleek charcoal grey suit, but wrapped an apron around her waist. And around her wrist she wore a delicate silver bracelet, its gems glinting softly in the dim light of her office. Tools and materials were scattered around the table, giving the impression that the headmistress was engaged in some sort of hands-on work. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of Claudia, but she was nowhere to be seen. Careful not to disturb the headmistress, I quietly backed out through the door. As I made my way back to the canteen, my mind buzzed with questions about Claudia's whereabouts. Perhaps she went back to have a recess break after a good scolding. At least that's what I hoped. Recess was about to end. I had to hurry. After a long night at Midnight Grove, I struggled to stay awake in the classroom. But it was odd that Claudia was not back for the lessons, even after the recess was over. The last school bell finally tolled. I packed my bag immediately and walked out of the gates of Midnight Grove, eager to go home. As I stepped out into the early morning light, the first rays of dawn breaking through the sky, I spotted Papa waiting for me, We then walked home together. Despite my parents' warm welcome, I still couldn't shake off the feeling of restlessness that had been gnawing at me all night. My parents noticed my grim expression and asked if everything was all right. I hesitated to share my doubts and burden them about the school. So I drew the curtains in, and as I lay in bed, I turned and tossed to get some sleep before school starts again in the evening. But I couldn't. I felt an urge to seek comfort from Mummy. So I walked to their bedroom and found the room empty. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye from Mummy's dressing table. I walked to the trinkets but stopped in my tracks when a silver bracelet winked at me. Well, I doubt Alexander graduated from Midnight Grove at all. I hope he went back to school, if not for the best education, at least for the canteen snacks that he's come to love so much. But he can't have failed that badly at society with a headmistress for a mother. Still, I wonder what his father does to put the food on the table. Now let's get back to you. What did you say you were looking for again?